I have made an order of presenters quite randomly, and hope that you're happy with it. I'm just going to read it up so that you know a little bit what's happening. I know there's some overlapping things, and there will always be overlapping things, but we were just talking about it that if three people have the same experience with something that works really well, that's fantastic, and then it will be reinforced, and I'm sure you all have slightly different aspects of it, so don't be afraid of that at all. We're just sharing what works. So in my order, I thought if Tom was going to start, and then June goes next, then we have Gary, then we have Christy, then Hugh, and then Dara, and then Niamh. And is there anybody else who had prepared a presentation that I don't know about? Then let us know now. Otherwise, those are the 7 presentations to go. Is that okay?
Yep.
So in that case, I would love Tom Crowley, please, to share his wisdom and experience with us.
Okay, hopefully this going first to be like whipping off a plaster. I've written a few things down.
Yourself, no.
I'm going to try to share the screen. There. Can everyone see that? Okay, brilliant. So I've written things down, mostly so that if I get lost, maybe someone can call it a bar number and let me know where I am. So today I've decided to talk a little bit about scales and their role as a toolkit in ensemble rehearsals. So last year, kind of, I suppose the start of 2019, I started experimenting with playing scales with ensembles at the beginning of rehearsals. What started as a simple G major scale to assess the facility within a very young and recently formed string quartet quickly became a broader experiment incorporating other ensembles. I found playing scales together was a settling experience for students who arrived into the room fluttering and nattering and running around the place. I also began to use the scale time to explore gestural movements and having different players lead in or, start the scale. To affect an articulation on a particular note. So I might announce someone the leader and tell them that, I want them to make everyone put an accent on whatever note in the scale without telling them beforehand, and then through gesture they have to kind of enact that and make it happen. So that's kind of where it started, and then expanding upon this, I decided to explore other ways in which scales can be used in an ensemble setting. So before I kind of get into the different ways you could use them, I thought I would have some pros and cons as to, why use scales. So in the pros, I found it's a source of common ground. So when students come in, be they shy, nervous, or just haven't a tap of work done, it's really nice for everyone to start with something everybody knows. And then, I guess even remembering myself as a student, there's nothing worse than getting off on the wrong foot and starting an hour lesson by kind of making a fool of yourself. So it's really nice to just have common ground in the beginning. And equally, it's a nice structured way to welcome everyone into a learning space. It's almost like, like a call to prayer kind of type thing, I guess, where, that very much announces the start of the lesson, and, chatter and all that is over, and I found it very useful in creating an environment. They also are a great canvas for musical games like Burn the Biscuit or a memory game, or any kind of game with really young kids. Using scales as a canvas was quite successful. And equally, they're a vehicle in which to improve gestural movement, intonation, ensemble skills, and oral skills. The cons are some students have mental blocks about scales, and this would only be exacerbated by unsuccessful integration. And scales have a bad reputation, and students are very suggestible creatures. And equally for teachers, some people find scales boring, which is a point of view I have no qualms with. So this may not be for everybody. But moving on, basically I took all the different things that I could think of to do with scales and I put them into 2 groups. All the variations have been put into 2 groups. So the first group is intonation. And the benefits of scale time can be gathered into, oh, I've already said that, 2 distinct groups. This is by no means an exhaustive list and represents more of a starting point. Within intonation, we can introduce many variations to our scales, and all of these are best played with longer notes to facilitate focusing on tuning. So just run through them really quickly. So unison playing, just playing the scale, a simple scale together while listening to tuning. Or later on with a slightly older group, if you're about to play a piece with a funny times or funny key signature, like F sharp minor or something, playing the scale together before you kind of embark upon the piece can help iron out any irregularities. Playing the scale in canon, it's very similar to the first one, but here, depending on if you do a canon by 2 notes or 3 notes or 4 notes, it becomes a very good way to practice tuning intervals. And from here, now this next one I wasn't sure about, but I put in anyway. So if you're going to start the scales, if you're going to start doing them in canon, a next step might be to just tell everyone, look, can we go from, you know, the point where everyone starts playing? And at that point, if you have a string quartet, you've got 4 people and at least 3 of them are playing nodes because they're starting not on the root. And that could be a really nice way to introduce nodes to younger students. Or it might not. I haven't done it and I'm not sure, but it was just an idea I put in there. Next one is contrary motion. So even like with really young kids doing, and I've tried this, if you just get them split into 2 groups and play the scale in contrary motion with each other, and it really helped them kind of identify their sound and identify other people's sound, you know, and you go, oh, that's the cello. Whereas if everyone's moving together, I notice sometimes kids don't actually kind of know which sound is theirs, which can lead to all sorts of problems. Arpeggios, so another variation, and this helps with your harmonic placement within a chord. So the student would be led to ask themselves, you know, who is in unison with me, and what's my function? Am I the root, the 3rd, the 5th, the 7th? Obviously that goes a bit more advanced, but even starting with, you know, who's playing the same note I'm playing is some good ear training for ensemble playing. And finally, I put in balance, even though balance is by its nature not really intonation. Any of the variations here represent a good opportunity to explore ensemble balance, and also become a canvas on which to practice leading or following crescendi or diminuendi. So with any of these, you can have you can, you know, anoint a leader and say, look, you know, I want some crescendos and diminuendos. Can you make them happen? And everyone's just going to follow you. Or even leaving that out, just balancing a string quartet playing a scale where everyone can be heard and everyone can hear everyone is pretty useful. A second group of variations is, I called it ensemble. So in the second group, we'll focus on variations that concern the beginning moment of a note. These variations do not require long notes, but excessive speed will blur results. If you fly through them, you're not going to get much out of them. So again, unison playing is here, but now instead of tuning, you're asking, you know, are we together and who are we following? From here, we can go into bowing, where you, again, anoint a leader and tell them to go wild. With the bowing in the scale and see how well everyone else copes with that, and you know, can they match the bowings, or can they at least get back in, you know, if it starts going like this and everyone knows that this one's the leader, can we resynchronize? From here, I thought you could add combine playing a scale with a challenging rhythm or syncopation from a piece that you will be covering later in the rehearsal. I'll find if you can get the rhythm on their ears. before they start trying to read it. Sometimes that solves problems before you encounter them. So if there's a piece, say, with some funny syncopation, you know, just introduce that syncopation and everyone plays the scale in unison to that syncopation before you get to the piece is handy. The next one, I have polyrhythms and cross rhythms. So with younger players, I found even asking the cellist to play minims while viola and second play crotchets and first plays quavers and obviously plays the scale up and down more than the others. That can be challenging for them, and it helps them with their ensemble playing, staying together, not rushing when you have the fast notes. It also kind of leads into sound identification because everyone's doing something different. And then this can scale hugely with the level of the group. So having them play, you know, like with an older group, if you had them play duplets and triplets and quintuplets in a scale together and everyone's in pizzicato and all the notes are landing where they should and evenly, well, there's some doing in that, and getting there is a bit of fun too. And finally, and in this section, I have accelerando and ritenuto, which is kind of mirrors the balance, variation, intonation, where you would anoint a leader and have them run everyone through accelerandos and ritenutos, only obviously this time it's with tempo rather than dynamic. And now just to finish up, I had an idea of using articulation as a catalyst in your scale variations. So adding articulation, including pizzicato, accents, and different bowing techniques to any of the above reinforces the ensemble learning skills. So, you know, if you're trying to get them to play a cross rhythm, if you can get them to do it in pizzicato, well, they're definitely going to be able, if it's together in pizzicato, it's going to be sorted in arco, it's going to be much easier. Equally, if you can get them to run through an accelerando or a diminuendo or a ritenuto or a crescendo while, you know, looking at an aspect of a piece that you're going to use later, if they can add all these little kind of aspects to it, then when they actually get to the piece of music, they go, oh, this is grand actually, because I don't have to slow down, we just play the rhythm now. And hitting secondary learning outcomes. So by adding these articulations or bowing techniques to the variations provides us with an opportunity to explore these articulations as an ensemble. So be it chamber music or with a string orchestra or whatever, I often find myself kind of flicking through the score really quickly, trying to find a passage of music where everyone has spiccato or those accents or pizzicato, and it takes time, and then you have to tell everyone what bar number that, you know, each person is going from, or you might say, oh, but can you play it in a different octave? But if you've looked at this aspect in the scales before you play the piece, then you've kind of saved a bit of time, and it also gives you an opportunity to talk about pizzicato. If everyone's doing it, you know, and no one's being left out of this section of rehearsal, you can really talk about like timbre of pizzicato or you know, where I'd like you to contact with the string. It's just, you know, I guess a streamlined way of doing these things that doesn't eat into other rehearsal time. And finally, playing to a complicated rhythm with rests and canon and contrary motion and pizzicato while slowing down. The world is your oyster. I usually try to come up with a variation before the lesson that deals with a feature of the piece that we'll be rehearsing later. So I don't just kind of do this as a form of torture for children, because that would be unpopular. But I will, you know, make sure that whatever the scale is almost like a kind of a prophetic summary of whatever it is that we're going to be dealing with later in the lesson. And I found that way that the groundwork is laid and you're kind of off to a really good start. So in conclusion, ultimately, my hope would be that by adopting a time for scales at the start of every rehearsal, many technical aspects of ensemble work can be dealt with in an efficient and meaningful way. So far, at least once a rehearsal, I found myself saying, you know, those scales we played at the start of the lesson, before dealing with an issue in what feels to me like a streamlined and organic way. This ultimately has made more time in rehearsal for phrasing and shaping and all the other great ambitions that we all have so often and found ourselves kind of running out of time on in the past. So I think, yeah, for me, that's the greatest boon, is it's a really efficient way of doing all the technical stuff. So you end up talking about music more, which I think ultimately is pretty good for the students. So that's it, really. Does anyone have any questions? I just kind of felt like a rant into the void because I can't hear anyone. But does anyone have any questions on any of that?
That was brilliant, Tom. Burn the biscuit.
Yes, I was wondering, what's burn the biscuit?
Oh, okay. So burn the biscuit would be you send one person. I don't think you can do it during COVID. You can't do anything during COVID. You send one person out of the room, and or just behind. You get them to close their eyes if they can't leave the room, and you get someone else to hide the biscuit, which is never a biscuit. It's often like my pencil, or a mute, or some small little object. They hide it in the room somewhere. I should mention this is much better with really young kids, teenagers, not so into it. So you hide the mute or the pencil, and then the first student re-enters the room, and everybody, like traditionally the way it would work would be everyone says, "Oh, you're hotter, you're hotter, you're hotter, you're really hot," and that's when they're about to find, or you're colder, you're colder. No, you're ice cold, ice cold. You're on the wrong side of the room, you're nowhere near it. But instead of using temperature, I just use dynamics. So everyone is playing the scale the whole time, and it gets louder and louder and bigger bows and brawler sound when they're really, really close. Or the opposite, kind of diminuendos into nothing. And that way, hopefully they find the biscuit. And then the person who found it, they're on, so they're going to be hiding it next, and they pick the next person. So it is kind of an old game with a music twist.
And what was the memory game?
Oh, so there's lots of different memory games. It could be, so like one variation I've played is, so you say 4 people, the first person starts, and they will play a number of notes of the scale, starting either at the bottom or the top. So they might just have a ya da 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 dum, and then the next person has to play ya da 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 dum, and their addition. It's a bit like I went to the shop and I bought a loaf of bread. I went to the shop and I bought a loaf of bread and a dinosaur. But instead of bread and dinosaur, it's a chunk of scale, starting at the root, going either up or down. So they really just have to remember, do we start at the top or the bottom, and how many notes did we play? But while they're kind of really concentrating on remembering, they're also playing scales for each other without being a bit nervous about it, which is good.
Thank you.
Sure.
I had a question as well,
yeah.
Tom.
Tom, do you want to stop screen sharing so we can see
Yes.
your beautiful face?
Did that work?
Yay.
That worked. That worked. I just had one question, Tom. When you were talking about arpeggios,
Yeah.
you said in combination with the above.
Yeah.
And I was wondering, did you mean that some players would play the scale and others would only join in on arpeggio notes, or did you mean everyone's playing arpeggios in canon? Or I was a bit lost.
So what I meant was that with combination to the above, I was referring to like country motion or modes or canon, because if everyone plays it in unison with each other, then you're not going to have intervals, say. So like it would be playing the arpeggios, but we're all going to do it in canon by one note, and that way we're actually playing chords because we're all on a different note of the chord and moving. And similarly, it works in the same or in a different way, but if you were to do it in country motion, or you could do it in canon and in country motion, so you get different combinations of notes at the same time.
Thank you.
Sure.
Just I don't know. Am I on? I am. Yeah. I had 2 things, Tom. One is just an idea that we do sometimes with the scale thing as well, where we use them to learn transposition. So the children will learn a passage within a key, within the scales and done the preparation, sing the thing in solfa, and then we'll do a scale, a different key. And then I will say to them, now you've got to play the piece of music in that key using those solfa notes, and it works on a simple level. It works extremely well with young children to actually get them to transpose music once they begin to hear it. But you have to relate it to solfa is the only thing.
Yeah, it sounds brilliant. I mean, give me a room of salsa babies, and I'd be a really
Yeah.
good teacher.
So you get them, and like they'll sing a song, and you'll have played the key, so they've isolated where their do re mi's are, and you give them the new scale in the do re mi's, and say, well, now those do re mi's now work with the same song, and they will almost instantly transpose for you, and it's fantastic. You're gonna have great fun with
That
it.
sounds brilliant.
Yeah, it's super, super, super. Katharina knows this story. Uh, this is a tough one, I gotta say. When you put down the thing about the intonation with the older students, often I, like most of you, I'm sure, have difficulties with them asking questions as to why they have to keep doing scales and one of the things I mentioned to them is the intonation story, and this relates to a teacher in Finland who is quite controversial in certain ways. And she gets her students to play when they get to a certain age, sort of 11, 12 or somewhere or others, they'll play a D and a B, so open D string, first finger, B on the A string, and they have to tune the B so that chord is perfectly in tune on their ears. And then she makes them tune the B to the E string. And so now they have to retune the B because it's not the same note anymore. And so you can point out to them that the note B is a different note within different scales, and this is why you have to prepare your tuning. The corollary is that if she's got students who can't hear you, she throws them out. That's it, you're finished. We've had this discussion with other teachers. She's thrown out people that have turned out to be very good musicians afterwards, who didn't listen to her and things like that. But it's her harshness aside, it's a very good exercise for developing and making certainly young people appreciate that tuning does change within every key, and that's why we do these sort of things. You know, that it's for their benefit and things. But it's a useful exercise. You should try it if you haven't done it already. Sorry for interrupting.
Okay, well, thanks very much, Tom. It was very comprehensive, and it would be great if we can actually have this that sheet afterwards. So we're hoping that we can put together zip files afterwards to share, you know, all our different presentations also from afternoon. I just feel I want some string quartets now. I really want, and I want some time with them to really do that. But I think, you know, I mean, what you said, that it's so efficient. And that we often feel, oh no, we have to get this piece ready, so let's just get into it and skip maybe that warm up, that it always backfires. So thanks very much. Okay, I'm very aware that we have loads of more presentations, so we leave right over to June. I know that June has prepared loads, and I don't know how, are you going to screen share?
I am going to try and screen share. Hopefully
Excellent.
It's
Screen
yeah, no, I was just going to say about the warm up as well. It's so important. I was doing body mapping as part of my music masters as well, and it's so important just to get into the zone, and you don't know what they've had before they get to your rehearsal space. So to warm up the body is so important. I get them to do like circles with their nose as well, and thanks to, I'm really nervous now to go after Tom. It's really yeah, so I just presented this now. I did send it to you just in case my internet was unstable, so I hope I don't go over too long. And is that okay?
Perfect.
Perfect, thank you. So thank you so much for having me on to discuss wind music. I'm a flute and piano teacher, and I have many hats, and I'm also a secondary trained music teacher and English teacher as well. So I'd have a few slides. I don't want to annoy you and death by PowerPoint, just to show what has worked for me. I don't have all the answers, and I've made lots of mistakes as well, especially during COVID times. This is more kind of what's worked for me during COVID times, and after yesterday's session, I panicked, and then I've written a load of books that work for me as well in wind ensemble. But I'm really inspired by both Katharina and Catherine's, that like everything's adaptable, and you know that's where I'll come to that at the end though. So I've just been inspired as well by the IAYO's webinars as well, and I've quoted you both heavily throughout them. So I've learned a lot about editing in iMovie, and I've researched on informal music education and playing by ear for my master's thesis, which I submitted at the end of September. So I'm really passionate about any type of music making, including chamber music, and I'd love to share some of the findings with you. So some families are very, very lucky. They've got a piano player, grade 8 piano player, and a flautist in the family. Again, though, like you said yesterday, it's very differentiated. It depends who is who's there, and also they might have a friend as well able to join in. But if they don't have that, I have recorded a lot as well, and I would always do that in or without COVID. I would always encourage, collaboration as much as we can. So, and then even in COVID times now, students have worked on a cappella apps, and they've been their own partners. And obviously, we know that collaboration is so important. So, and we all know that any type of chamber music builds listening skills, sight reading, creativity, leadership, and collaboration, which is wonderful. So and even my piano students now, we would always play with the band in Dozen a Day, the warm-up tracks, and they're so fantastic, and I would really encourage that as well. And I suppose YouTube is becoming more important now, but what is working for me at the moment is telling the story. So at the moment I've got the Nutcracker Suite, and I've got parts, so the theory class are coming together and they're going to read the parts of the Nutcracker Suite, and then there's going to be a piano duet playing the part, so there's going to be a cue. So and I was really inspired by Katharina's collaborative storyteller, I think is in Gort, and it's something I would love to do in the future. So I really want to tap your brains with that as well. And obviously, if the students could actually do their own compositions, because I do a composition competition mostly every month. It's kind of gone by the wayside now with COVID because we're not there together, but it's something that I'd love to do in the future and get and collaborate more on. So, and it obviously it's great for practice as well, and creativity. So I was kind of looking at the mistakes I made during COVID, and to use mistakes as a reflection tool. So we started off with just using gestures, and we were playing a flute quartet and lead. Like obviously we would do that anyway. So even if we were practicing, we might just concentrate on the gesture, and then we would take that in turns as well, like Tom's saying about the follow the leader, which is fantastic. We didn't do click tracks during COVID. We just used the gesture, and we layered it up from the bottom with one track. We kind of passed it around. Very time consuming, and I suppose watching the screen and the person consistently was quite difficult, and but it's good as well for us all, and we have to listen very, very carefully as we would in physical times as well. We also tried to do one student conducting a la Eric Whittaker, and that was great for them because they gave the sense of pulse, they gave the ownership to the piece, and it was really, really good in that kind of way. So I mentioned already about the a cappella. So we did settle on the click track, but it did take a long, long time to edit, and it's something I don't want to go down again. But instead of just the click track, we used Lum Beats on YouTube, and we just had a drum kit doing the tap there. So I'm lucky enough to be involved in the SMEI, the Society of Music Education in Ireland, and we've been doing some webinars, and the advice there is to keep it simple. Flutes aren't as bad spreaders as we thought during COVID. It's actually bassoons and tubas, and I play bassoon as well, so that's me out. But they suggested that oboes and clarinets and whistles should have a cloth to cover and collect any moisture. All things should be wiped down, and ideally, like Catherine said and Katharina suggested in their webinars in August, outside would be better, or I just heard you at the start there under a tarpaulin. So fingers crossed, and everything, we can get back to normal. But I really want to share with you today my research project findings. And now I know I'm amongst a very amazing bunch of experts here, and I'm talking to the converted, but maybe it's something you might not have considered. So during the summer, I completed my Masters for Music Education project, and I'd love to share these findings. My project was based on Lucy Green's Playing by Ear project, HELP, H-E-L-P. So it stands for Hear, Listen, Play. And this is an informal learning program that can be used in a formal setting. So for example, I used it with my students who would typically read notation in the music classroom. Lucy Green's project combined this natural musicianship and love of listening to music and playing by ear. So she combined these two things together within a formal setting. So this could work wonderfully, I feel, in a chamber music setting, both physically and remotely. You could actually introduce a theme on a Zoom get together and play the full track. So what happens is students listen to the full song and then the isolated lines, gradually building the knowledge of the song. Like Tom was saying there with the scales, that you could start with just the scales and who's playing the scale. So it's quite similar. I hope I've done this right in that you can see my screen. Can you see my screen? Yeah, brilliant. Thank you, Tom. Lucy Green's thing here was you play the full song and then they would pick out the parts by ear. Hopefully you can hear it. So there's just a simple track. And then you would go back, because that's the full track for 2.5 minutes. I won't bore you, but then you would pick out the bass line, for example. So etc. So and something that I never learned by that, I would have just sat in front of the TV and picked out theme tunes. And I know some of our students would just do notation. So that would be the bass line that they pick out. And gradually you introduce more lines and more lines till they have the full track. So it is a method which relies on technology and preparation, which is what we've all learned through COVID times. So if we look at my website there for a moment, this is something I would never actually ever teach, and it's Pachelbel's canon. So I can see Hugh laughing at me there. So if and it's shocked me that I've allowed it, but like I think the time that's in it and everything. So I recorded it. Please excuse the recording of it. I would get the students to record it in the future now. So they would hear. It's a trio. We all know it. We don't need to listen to it again. And then I would have isolated the track then. So say, for example, the bass line there. So you'd hear that. Then we also did, so you see that's the full track, and then you have the isolated lines. So all the students have the autonomy to learn all of the parts in a way that they would choose without notation. So it's a really freeing experience, I found, and if they are used to the notes. And same as Tom's scales, it could be used as a gathering exercise, and really isolating those lines. So you could also do different genres as well. As you can hear here, we've got the Queen of Sheba. You'd maybe slow that down, then you'd have a different line, then it would be slower. So you could also then change the genre of the music.
I took the supermarket flowers from the windowsill. I threw their DOT from the crowd.
So you'd really encourage the students to record their own songs and lines eventually once they conceptualize playing by ear. So my research tested the skills of improvisation, playing by ear, aural, and performance both before and after this intervention. Now, we didn't get onto supermarket flowers until later. We just started with Lucy Green's Dreaming. And I found that the scores given by participants who would have who marks themselves, they're mainly piano players now and a few flute players and critical experts. They found that the ear play really assisted with musical confidence. So the musical confidence, rhythm improved as well, and the flow and resilience. So this confidence really came, and they were making mistakes left, right and centre, but the fact that they were doing it was really wonderful. And improvising and sight reading also improved. And it's something that I didn't really consider during the project was how good they were at improvisation. I really didn't. They really surprised me. So in conclusion, to return to the advice from SMEI, keep it all simple, revisit a piece but change it. And this is what something they said in SMEI. So this Pachelbel's canon, I couldn't believe it. I was, oh my God, I'm like, no. But it was wonderful because it was a piece that they chose themselves, that they wanted to learn. And like this advice is keep it simple, give the students the musical autonomy to arrange it, memorize it, play it by ear, and the memorization skill is so important as part of being a musician. And it's being a real musician, isn't it? To have it by memory. eyes closed or concentrate on the process. As Fiachra Garvey said, he was putting on the West Wicklow Music Festival. He said that music academies don't teach us how to put on a festival. So it's our responsibility as music educators to really give them the sense of occasion and the sense of purpose as well, and different transferable skills. So, and also as Catherine's IAYO presentation said, you have to try, and you have to be really clear as well. You have to model what you want. You have to have the music stand there, the full screen as well. And the students will always surprise you, and be creative as well, as Katharina has inspired us all by writing all her own music as well. So finally, students will always surprise you and others. And just to leave you on this, we usually do focus, we always do a flute choir, we just gather all the students and some professionals as well into Stephen's Green Shopping Centre. We roughly always get about 1,000 or something for Focus Ireland, but now we're just going to keep it very simple. It'll be one song, no tempo changes, click track, and we have got collaboration. And Katharine said that in her IAYO thing, it has to be collaboration. So the sense of togetherness will be wonderful until we're together again, and just to keep it positive. Now, after yesterday, I'm so sorry, I didn't really focus on like what usually works. I kind of went for like COVID times, but I just have this that you can just send out there what really works for me. I've got some flute duets there, some trios, and then some choir pieces as well. The ABRSM actually have a lovely piece here of ensemble pieces, and they range from bronze all the way to gold, and I think they have an exam kind of base as well, but I wouldn't really go for exams. It's all about camaraderie and coming together and listening, etc. So I'll leave that with you, and there's a few websites as well there. So Wonderful Winds is great once you've got onto your you know what you're doing, and there's a few amazing ones there, but I'll leave that and I won't go on anymore if that's okay. So I'm happy to take questions. Thank you.
Great, thanks very much, June. That was very comprehensive as well. And yeah, it's great to hear as well what people are doing. We were discussing at the beginning, should we make it all about what we do during COVID? But it's great to have a mix, to see also that we hopefully one day will get out of it and are prepared then to go on. That's great. I think we go to the next presenter, unless there's any very urgent questions, so that everybody gets. Tom, okay, has an urgent question.
Can I ask a really quick question? I was just wondering, you mentioned Lum Beats on YouTube, and I'm not sure what that is.
So it's just a website, and it's a drummer basically keeping the time. So he would say you put in crotchet, you just look up Lum Beats and you do crotchet 90, and he will just tap it away there, and he'll do a little bit of a click on the I'll just quickly show you now. He literally just do a click there, and he is brilliant because it makes it a bit fun.
I've got this scruffy beard because when I shave, I get this awful.
Isn't it? It's usually Grammarly, isn't it? Okay, sorry.
It makes suggest.
Sorry, on YouTube.
Oh, isn't it? Just Lum Beats, and then he just drums it there at 100. It keeps it consistent then. Oh my goodness, it's the longest advert ever. Sorry. I should get it ready. So he would just tap away there. He's really cool.
It's really handy.
And it just, for piano students, it's so good because they're just like, yes, it gives them some sort of fun. And yeah, he does most tempos there. He's brilliant. Lum Beats. Tony Brown from the Academy actually suggested that now, so he just makes it fun.
Thanks, that's cool.
You pop that, sorry, excuse me, will you pop that into the chat for the dyslexic among us that can't possibly work out what Lum? Not this morning.
Excellent. Thanks very much, June. So I think we gonna how we gonna structure this now is that we have 4 presenters before. So if we have Gary next, and then Christy before our break, and then we'll take our break. So Gary, over to you.
Good morning, everyone. I really want to show off this cup because you all probably saw it, but my friend got me this Matilda cup, which I think is gorgeous. It's really pretty, and inside there's a little book that you see when you drink your coffee, so just want to show that off. You'll probably be really happy to hear that mine is quite short, and really I'm just looking at repertoire that has worked for me, kudos to Tom and June. They had like really scientific, almost like master's level presentations. Mine is very basic, so just bear with me for a sec. So I'm going to start sharing my screen. Hopefully, if somebody can just throw their mic on and let me know that they can see when I put up this presentation, that would be great.
Bang on.
And we'll press play here. Can you see that?
Perfect.
Awesome. Okay, these are all really short, so we won't worry too much. So I just want to talk really quickly first about the warm-up, and I think myself and Tom have got some pretty similar ideas about the importance of scales, but I'll talk about the importance of tuning first of all. And I've always tried to like foster this I think positive environment around tuning, and I feel so sorry for my violinists in quartets when they're fiddling around with pegs and they feel really uncomfortable that they're really holding back the ensemble from playing. So we have a zero tolerance in terms of people like putting others under pressure to be in tune. Obviously there's a time when we'll step in and help people tune up, but it's something that we really foster as a positive environment, that this is something that really has to be done. We have to be perfectly in tune before we can play, so take your time. And that's something that I suppose I really learned through my own experience with my quartet Amoroso. When we played with Contempo, they were so lovely in terms of the process that they went through to allow us to tune, and their patience and time. And they're like, no, what are you rushing for? It's not right. So just take your time. So yeah, we spent 2 years with the Galway Music Residency and learned a huge amount from them, but tuning is wicked important, and people should never feel under pressure. I do use a lot of scales as warm-ups, particularly I think once kids have their basic, probably what we would call primary scales, G, D, A, we kind of do start messing around with scales. I did draw up a musical example of this, but I couldn't put it in. But you guys all know what a scale in canon looks like. So we do our scales in unison first, and what it really helps to do is to get into a certain sound world for my students. They all feel really fulfilled when they can hear the intervals together. And as Tom pointed out, like whenever you start at 2-note intervals, 1-note intervals, the different harmonic structure of those notes can lead to some really interesting feedback from students. So like normally whenever we have scales in canon, they mention things like film music and a really full warm sound, which is achieved really easily by playing these scales in canon. I just want to show you really quickly, I'll show you afterwards, I have a copy of The Flipper Rhythm by Sheila Nelson. I don't know if any of you guys have that book. It's really good as a warm-up tool, where you can pick like combinations of rhythms. So you can say, okay, violins, I want you to play this top rhythm, and cellos, you play the bottom rhythm, and they can use that as their scale warm-up rhythms as well. So it's really interesting. It adds a different dynamic. I'll show it to you. Very easy to get. It's published by Boozy and Hawks. And yeah, I'll show you at the end. It'll make more sense if you can actually see me flip the rhythm. All right. So yeah, scales is a warm-up in canon, 4-note, 2-note intervals, and using different combinations of rhythm. And then I would always start with the major scale and quickly talk about how do we make this major into minor and kill two birds with one stone in that sense. And then we talk about what does that sound like? How do you feel when we make it minor? And more importantly, can you tell me what makes it minor? And kids really love that challenge. They're like, well, it just sounds different. But like actually getting them to articulate what did you change to make it minor? That's something that they're really interested in. I think it's really important then when you have limited time, as many of us do, to teach a young ensemble, and I think I'm talking kind of primarily about quartets or string orchestra, I would always try and put up a little schedule. What are we going to do in this session? Because you can find in ensemble playing that time can tick away so fast and there's nothing done. And you feel like, oh God, we just went to all this effort and we got 4 bars. So that could be 4 good bars, but like, I think it's important that there's a little bit of a schedule. So in non-COVID times when we were rehearsing live, there would always be a whiteboard, and it's important for the children to see, right, we're gonna tune now, we're gonna play a scale now, and then we're gonna do section A of this piece. And as you do them, tick them off. I think there's something really comforting in the visual side of, okay, we've achieved that part, so we know we're doing something. That's something that I did in my own quartets also. We used to rehearse for 2-hour stints, but we would have a definite, this is what we need to have done by then. So it just puts a little bit of structure on a rehearsal. It can be quite free unless you put some parameters on it. And then what are we playing? And something that I brought I think from Contempo to my own quartet was like playing towards imagery, feelings, emotions, flavors, anything that you can use to describe the particular passage of the music that you're playing. So often we would have a postcard with a certain image on it planked in the middle of the quartet, and we would play towards the cliffs of Moher, or we would play towards the sunshine, or something visual that can help you evoke the emotions that you're looking for. And it's surprising. I don't know how well it would work for younger kids, but it certainly worked for my own quartet. And we usually would have some type of image propped up, so that we would have a certain thing to refer to when we were looking at Death and the Maiden and freaking out. Okay, so the next slide. I'm going to talk really quickly about the importance of score study. If children are fairly confident and comfortable in reading their own parts, certainly I would always give them a copy of a page of the score so that they can see where they fit into the grander scheme of things. And I think it's never too early to introduce a little bit of score study, particularly if you're doing something that's really well known, that they can go to YouTube, they can have their score, and they can listen to it and follow it and identify where they fit into that jigsaw puzzle. Now, obviously, it's depending on level and the age of the students and whether or not it's going to be a success in that sense. But we talk often about getting your head out of the sand whenever you're in quartet, and that you're part of a bigger unit, so that it's not just you, and you have to be aware of what happens around you. And it's surprising how much children can learn from looking at the actual score, because in the rehearsal they might not realize, okay, he's playing the same rhythm as me, until they actually see it written down and they can compare and contrast. So score study is something that I do encourage quite a lot. And this is a sample of just something that I would normally give out to my students. I'll show you these collections because I have, because of the time of year, given you a little bit of Christmas repertoire for strings, which is hard to come by. But this is something that they would get, and I'd be like, okay, do you see how your rhythm is the same? So violin 1 and viola have the same rhythm, and then violin 1 breaks away. And like a little bit of awareness of what happens. It never goes astray, I think, in quartets. All right, so that's 2 examples of scores, but the kids would get this along with their individual part, and then they would look at their line, they'd know where to find their line, and they would know how they interact with others, where they're similar and where they're different. Okay, so string repertoire for Christmas is something that I personally have found hard to get that's in any decent quality, really. I know loads of people, millions of people around the world have made great efforts and stabs to do these things for strings, but whether or not they're nicely applicable is a different matter. So some of the ones that I found really good, oh my God, how blurry is that picture? Sorry. So String Time Christmas, if any of you have used the String Time series by Kathy and David Blackwell, they're excellent. They're fantastic resources for strings. And there is like String Time Beginners, you'll have String Time Joggers. So it's alongside the Violin Time Runners Joggers series that they did, and a comparable level to those as well. So you'll have something that's a little bit more difficult for the upper lines, and then something open string and first finger for the bottom lines. But they're very fulfilling little ensemble pieces, and they always have backing tracks, which are really satisfying, with loads of percussion added and jingle sticks and cymbal crashes and stuff. So it's an epic experience for all. These ones are coming now with a little bit more of a downloadable backing track versus a CD track, which is an advantage and a disadvantage. But for the most part, I'm finding that the majority of my students do not have a CD player, and they're like, what's that? So if I can give them an MP3, it's much easier for them. So that's just a sample of my age, I think. So yeah, a lot of them have not got CDs at all, or CD players. So they actually do ask for MP3 tracks, and it's a pain to transfer them. So these books are good in that sense, that they come with it. A little bit more intermediate then is Anita Hewitt-Jones. I'm going to talk about her later in other rap that I found really good. Her hidden carols are absolutely stunning for strings. And she tends to be quite easy to get online. Like her parts and music are not that difficult to come by. But it's a really nice collection, and very satisfying in terms of harmony and rhythm. So I found those really nice. And they're just good for like Christmas recitals. I know we haven't got many this year, but they're always good to have in the filing cabinet. And then this really beautiful old version of Christmas Tunes for My String Orchestra by Sheila Nelson. A lot of people, I think, know a lot about her earlier quartet books and stuff, but this is a really nice comprehensive arrangement of string rep for Christmas, and as Katharina said, completely major and nothing surprising. But they're really nicely done and they're very full, so the parts tend to be very dense in terms of harmony, but really nice manageable rhythms and just very good standards, I think. Okay, and then other repertoire that I've found, particularly as a cellist, to be satisfying for the students that I would put forward for groups and stuff. I want to talk about the Spider's Web really quickly. So Anita Hewitt-Jones had a daughter who played cello and was always complaining that the cello part had single crotchets and an Umpty Dumpty rhythm. So this is a comparable cello concerto for string quartet. The cello has the melody and it's definitely a bigger challenge. It is full of arpeggios. True to Anita Hewitt-Jones, you'll have an arpeggio in E and then suddenly you'll be in E flat. So she's very fond of that type of harmony structure, but this is a beautiful piece. I think there's two movements. There's the beginning, which is definitely all cello based. It's got very swooping melody. And the second movement, of course, would be a tarantella. And I think it's actually spelled tarantula in the part. Yeah, very satisfying for cellists. So if you have any cellos that are really giving out about the fact that they only ever have basic stuff, this is the go-to. And it's a big challenge. I would say definitely for grade 5+. There's a lot of different positions in this. Positions that we wouldn't normally zoom in on, like half position and a little bit of upper third and stuff like that. So things that they wouldn't normally consider, but it's a really good way to get people playing in half position as well, because a lot of it is in E flat with really low arpeggios. So very fond of that piece as a cellist. It was one of my favorites when I was young. The Mary Rose, I think a lot of you might know already. This is a fantastic piece and something that a lot of my younger students would always kind of, they would call it or deem it film music because it's so dramatic. I don't know if many of you know it, but it has a massive variety of different techniques. And basically this warship, the Mary Rose, sets out from the UK. There's a battle between the UK and France. National anthems are battled against each other in the middle. And the ship sinks using a very long glissando, starting extremely high on the C string on the cello, and it's a glissando tremolo until it's at the bottom of the ocean. And then the ship comes back as a ghost with everything PPP and very distant. She used a lot of techniques as well, like harmonics and different harmonic slides and things to bring out the drama, and a lot of big chords, so 4-note chords in the cellos and stuff to signify canon, and it's great. It's really fulfilling. Again, like definitely an intermediate piece. You're looking at between grade 3 to 5, I'd say. And I think there is an optional double bass part, which is good for this, because the double basses are often left out of string rep. A huge amount for quartet, not that much for double bass, and then we have to write out a double bass part. I know, which can be time consuming also. But with any of these Hewitt-Jones things, you'll always get a third violin part if you have an absence of violas, which is good. And then this one, again, a little bit more difficult. This is the Anacline of Strike Music, or Little String Music by Bertold Hummel. I would say, again, grade 5+ for this one, just solely because the rhythms are awkward, but very fulfilling, and it's really good fun. Again, much more contemporary and a little bit of a film feel in this one. So a lot of students really like the first movement. There's a really nice tango in it as well. So that's one that, again, my students have found really fulfilling. Okay, I think that's the end of mine. It is. So I will stop the screen share. Ooh, hang on. We'll stop the share. And then, yeah, you guys can ask me any questions if you have any.
Excellent.
I don't have a question, but I have something to say. I really want to thank you that you brought some music with you that where the cellos can play, because I'm looking for that. And also sometimes I have strong viola players and weak violinists, and it's not so easy to find good music. So you have to rewrite the first violin for the cello or the second violin for the viola. It's a lot of work, and it's a bit stupid because there's so many music that you have to put all that work in it. And now I have some great examples.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I had something to add to what you said about your Christmas music. This week I found out about Peter Breiner. I don't know if you know that man. He's an arranger.
I don't know.
And I heard a piece on the radio where he combines classical music with Beatles songs.
Oh.
I didn't know it. It was really great. It was very difficult, and there was a solo violin part, so I went to look for it.
Oh, is that the Beatles Go Baroque?
But I found on Nexus. What'd you say?
Is that it? I think that collection is called The Beatles Go Baroque. It's Concerto Grossi for strings.
Yeah. And then there's already 2 CDs of it, yes. And then you have, I think, Elvis Goes Baroque as well. But yeah, I was looking for the music, the parts. I didn't find it, but I found on Nexus Christmas music that he arranged for string quartet, but really advanced. So if your advanced students want to play some Christmas music that is really not the normal easy quartet things or duos that you, then I think it might be interesting, but I have to look into it because I just found out this week.
Katharina is friends with him on Facebook. I'm just going to name drop for her. That we had done
well, I think
we had done one of his movements. We'd done Here Comes the Sun in Orchestra Camp.
We've done another one.
They're brilliant.
I think the only reason he wanted to be friends with me on Facebook is to check up that I'm actually not performing his music without any. That's very.
You're not bosom buddies then.
Oh yeah. Just before we go.
With the music, and you can only rent it. Oh yeah, that flipper rhythm is
okay.
Showing up there. Great. So it just tells me my internet connection is unstable. I hope you can still hear me. I think we move on to Christy, and we are actually, everybody is taking their 15 minutes at the moment, so we might need the whole 2 hours, and we have to make sure everybody is getting their part in, but it's hugely interesting. So thank you so much. We move on with Christy. And Christy, if you want me to share any of your scores, just let me know, and I will share the ones. I have the 3 ones that you sent me open.
Thanks, Katharina. Hello, everybody. Great to see you, even though it's a little bit weird on Zoom. You'll be happy to know that I do not have an entire PowerPoint, so it will be a lot shorter, but I really appreciate all the work everyone else has put into their PowerPoints. I have 1 page of points. I'm going to attempt to I'm going to try and share it with you, but I haven't done this before. So let's just see if I can do this. You know what? I'm going to leave that. I have lost you people already. Okay,
yeah,
I'm gonna.
I just think talk about it. It will be fine, and you can send it on. We can have the whole package afterwards.
Okay, so first I would really like to talk about building string quartets when you only have access to upper strings. Now, the reason that I'm talking about this is because I waited many years for the magical partnership with a lower string teacher. I finally found one, and then she quit shortly after, so that was quite a challenge. And then I just realized that there were other ways of working around the situation, and I'd like to share what I have been doing. In Belgium, in Leuven, where I live, there is quite a shortage of young cellists. The music school system doesn't really encourage very young players, so that is improving. And so when working with young children and wanting to do string quartet music, I had this problem. So I luckily teach violas as well. And I started with the whole question of the bass line. What does one do with the bass line? So as we all know, we can't have a string quartet without a bass. Your bass line does not always need to be your most technically difficult part. And so I went about this whole situation with taking viola players who were younger than the violinists in the quartet. And if you ask such a viola player, they are very honored to join the group of older players. For them, it's really a place to rise to a challenge, and they're very excited about this. So I'm going to be reading from notes, which is always a little bit boring, but a little bit more focused. So I started with, it's all about the bass. You essentially need a bass line. We also essentially need a rhythmic guide to every group. When you're working with children who need to listen to each other and listen to their own central sound, it's very important that you create rhythmic stability. So my solution was to give the bass line to the cello, to the viola players. Most viola methods and viola pieces are always going up on the A string. It would seem that violists have very little time to really enjoy their C strings. I enjoy very much the books of Kathy and David Blackwell, and I always use all the C string special pieces so that my violists can really enjoy their sonority and enjoy what they have that violinists don't. So I really use the lowest range of the viola to provide bass in groups. The rest that I'm going to tell you, I'm afraid, is preaching to the choir. You are all very familiar with the basics about the weakest link. Your group will sound best when your weakest player is playing their best. Very important never to let a player fumble along and hope that they will somehow either not be heard or catch up with the others. It's very important to empower the weakest player in your group. Look to their abilities. I found that sometimes in a group on an IAYO workshop, if I found a struggling player, I would ask them aside in a break time and ask if they would be prepared to shoulder the challenge of providing rhythmic stability for the rest of their group. And I would sell it to them as the greatest need of the group. Instead of telling them that I was simply going to simplify their parts because I could see they were struggling. It also depends slightly on how you word things. This built a lot of confidence in some of these young players who would then do their best to create the rhythmic stability, feeling that it was their responsibility. They would play better, the group would play better. So always important to empower your weakest players. With my use of viola players, as I said, a younger or less advanced player does not always mind a more simplified line, and will do their best to play it very well, so that they do not lose face with the older children around them. Once again, when making arrangements, I was very, very inspired by Katharina, by Katharine. Working together with them on orchestra has been a great pleasure, and just seeing how they arrange things, how things can be put together. I also find with an arrangement, it's very important always to provide a slight challenge, a gentle push, some position work or a new finger pattern, while consistently showcasing the strengths of the players so that they are never drowning. I also enjoy with quartets to arrange a favorite repertoire piece of each player. This way they each get a spot where they can be the soloist, where they can be in the limelight and feel really good about a repertoire piece. It breeds a lot of enthusiasm, and you end up with 4 new repertoire pieces quite easily. Once again, no boring pa parts for any players, not even when you want to make a simplified part for a bass line or for a struggling player. It's always important, as I learned from Katharina Baker, to make sure that every part has a very interesting bit of melody, a bit of challenge. It's very good if you can give all the players a chance at the melody, and also give the more spoiled first violinists a chance to hold the rhythm or bass parts. I've attached three scores that I've sent through that everyone can have a little look at. They might not be the best arrangements. They're simple arrangements that I made for my students in the setting of 3 violins and a viola. I love using canons with my students. When you have very young kids, you can start with a very simple canon like Frère Jacques in English, I think it's called Are You Sleeping, Brother John? It's quite a favorite here in Belgium. And that I like to use, playing it in unison as an intonation exercise, working with canon. Of course, is a big difference for young children if they start the canon or have to come in second or third or fourth. So I like to use canons a lot with quartets. It challenges the players to pay attention to their own voice while listening to the others and seeing how they fit into the greater part. So here's a Hungarian canon that I really like. The viola player at the time needed something very stable, very basic, so I gave her something very basic. First violinist needed a challenge, so we did some position work, but that group still loves playing this piece and does it a lot. It sounds very beautiful. It's in a minor key, and it's a very pretty piece. Ping pong I attached as well. That was also a slight exercise. I found that in a duo part. There's a Belgian violinist who has been making some very interesting scores, and a method is called string fun. And ping pong is from his book of string fun. His name is Dirk Lievens. He's got ensemble books as well at the moment. And I took that from a duo of his that I just arranged. Katharina, could you put ping pong on, please?
I have ping pong on here since a while. Do you not see it?
No, I have Hungarian canon.
Oh,
maybe
I have
only me.
ping pong since half an hour here. Okay.
That's okay.
I go back to ping pong. So I was enjoying ping pong here all along. Here it is. Can you see it now?
Yes, thank you. Thank you. So this is just an opportunity to work on a few things, on dynamics, on articulation, and the use of the, I just have to think about what that is in English, the use of the harmonics, which also is a good exercise and quite a lovely little piece there. Thank you very much, Katharina. And my last point is simply communication and leadership, which is give everybody a chance to lead, whether it's by making an arrangement where there's an upbeat or a rhythmic intro. There's Daydream. Daydream is this lovely little piece of Kathy and David Blackwell, a lovely C-string piece for viola that our violist loved so much that I just put it into a small arrangement for the group, and she was thrilled to be able to show off what she can do and what she loves most. Right, so back to communication and focus, the lovely ideas, the things that I heard there also from Tom, from Gary, giving different people a chance to lead is very important, that they listen to each other. And that's basically it. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Christy. That brings us up to our break. And I think we keep it short and sweet. Make yourself a cup of tea. It is, if we start again 5 to 12, is that okay? That gives us 7 minutes on my watch.
She's German. Don't pay attention to her. Midday.
Absolutely.
5 to 12. And
We
then
aim for 5 till we start at noon.
Exactly, Bertie. Well done.
Then everybody has at least 10 minutes now, because we have Hugh and Dara and Niamh to still share their amazingly creative and innovative and inspiring ideas with us, and we don't want to cut them short now. Thanks very much, Christy. That was great, and something new again, really thrown into the mix. And bye.
Okay, see you in 5.
Very soon, Dara, you can tell us all about it. But now
Yes.
it is time for Hugh Kelly to share his inspirational ideas with us. So Hugh, you're on. And we give you 10 minutes. We have to start limiting time here now. Katharine is our time holder. So off you go.
I will keep it short because most everybody's done very elaborate presentations and things like that. My knowledge of PowerPoint, by the way, just to make other people feel comfortable, was when people were screen sharing this morning, I was trying to move it with my mouse. I did think last night I might sit down and try it, but I gave up in the end. So these are just very briefly, most of this is going to deal with alternate repertoire, really. So as most of you know and are sick to death of hearing at this stage, I do a lot of my work through color strings. So we incorporate ensemble playing from the very beginning. It's actually part of the lessons. It's not actually a separate discipline. So when the children are growing up, as far as they're concerned, playing as ensembles is actually an integral part of being a violinist. So the minute that they can actually play open strings, there are beautiful duets for them to play, where they have to just keep a line against melodies that are always challenging. I have to be honest with you. Some of them are quite dissonant. They produce very strident harmonies and things like that, and the children really have to sort of fight their corner to keep their lines, which I quite like. And then sort of parallel to that, within the training thing itself, there's a very strong focus on rhythm. I made a copy of the slides, which I will share later on. But say from the very beginning, within about a week or two, children will play duets. Just to show you what it looks like here, I'm going to share this. Just so you can see quickly to get an idea of it, if you can see that. So these are just crotchets. The two colors refer to the G and the E strings. One person playing E, one person playing G. They have to contain pulse, they'll match dynamics, they'll match bow strokes. And they have to wait and listen and count and make sure that they are matching the other person as they're doing it. And as they develop, and these all have to be done separately, as I've been watching with Katharina, say just quickly, so that I don't delay, because I'll just share it out later on. The minute, for instance, that they learn quavers, the music has now developed straight away. So now they're playing quaver duets, and they've incorporated those. And so from every aspect of that, it develops through, let's say, I'll see if I get a nice one here, just to show you later on what we do. And just pick something with a bit more complexity. And here, this one. So by the second year, say they're playing something like this. And at this level, you've got, this is a bit like the flipper rhythm thing that somebody was showing a minute ago, where this is actually now part of the class. It says 2 students, but I would often do it as teacher and student, and they learn both parts. But what we do with this, I suppose, that makes it a bit more fun is after they all have to speak and clap all of these rhythms. So just to be clear, when we're doing ensemble work, everything that we do is actually internalized before we play it. And I'll come to that in a minute when I'm talking about the orchestra stuff. So the children will have clapped and played, or clapped and spoken all of these rhythms and things like that, and then they'll play them on open strings. But what we like to do at this stage is then give them a couple of notes and ask them to improvise. And so they have to compose sort of random melody-ish sort of things. But and while it's chaotic at the start, and quite difficult for them to be able to actually read and then try to think about what they're going to play, the process does develop, and you suddenly get children who develop very strong independent sense of what they're playing, which is quite remarkable, really. Because the color strings people, there's a guy called Laszlo Rossa, who is the composer for the series, and he has produced an astonishing array of chamber music, which I'll share with you in a second. But it's incredibly difficult or incredibly challenging music, and like this sort of work here is essential for anybody who's even contemplating taking on some of what they do. And like I think it was Katharina was saying yesterday, I mean, that crowd in Finland have one of the best youth orchestras in the world. And the reason that they have one of the best youth orchestras is, I think what Katharina was saying, is that they built it up through their chamber music program. The children are so strong independently on their lines that when they become part of the larger ensemble, that strength comes with them. And it really is quite extraordinary when they do those things. So we work, as I say, on this kind of thing all of the time, and we end up with pieces, or they end up with pieces of music in this series of books, which I will try and share with you, because I did download some of this stuff earlier on just to let you see. I have to find something that looks like a Safari page. 1 second now. There. That it? Yes. So now I can share this screen with you. So this is the repertoire end of that, just to let you see. So this here is just the website. So this book here, the Duettini, that's the one with the open strings for children when they start to play. Immediately they can play two-part pieces of music, which get from very simple to really complex pieces with just open strings. And then there's a series of books called Chamber Music for Young String Players in 3 volumes, which is mostly for 3 violins with sort of ad-lib cello parts. So Christy, that's the kind of stuff you were talking about earlier on, where you have that ability to work with just the upper strings in very interesting situations. And then they has this. A lot of these are out of print. I happen to have the series, but the Colourful Music for Strings, volumes 1 to 5. And I have to say they vary considerably in standard. It's not that 1 contains sort of grade 1 and 5 contains grade 5. There are easy and very complex pieces right throughout the series. I don't think it was designed with any particular with any particular structure in mind. The books are all laid out in quartet format. In these ones, and there are no parts, which is a bit awkward at times, I find, for young children, especially trying to follow them and things like that. So what we've done, or we of course, is the royal we in that particular instance. What I've done with these is, just to show you quickly, is I have made these. So this is an example of using the colors here that we do. So the children, this is a canon, and it's a canon at the 5th, which is quite interesting because again it produces quite strident harmonies, and the children really have to work quite hard to play and to maintain their parts, because the melodies, while they're the same, and the logic of the piece eventually becomes apparent, they have fun. To be honest with you, at the start, I wasn't entirely certain myself about whether or not children would enjoy music that is quite so strident and things like that. But actually, they love it, and I think what they love is winning. That sense of achievement that they get out of playing pieces like this is just fabulous. And as you can see, the parts are structured so that we've got a bottom part here, which is always in and around, at these early ones, some of the early ones that I selected, in and around open strings and things like that, which is quite useful, and they have to count carefully, and there's good dynamics and things like that that come in with them. I'll share one more just to show you. But there's no way to share them all at the same time, unfortunately. I'll do one other one, like say this one here, which is just a pizzicato piece, which is quite lovely. And these are ones I had to go and take from those books and then arrange like this so that I could produce parts and put them into colours. But it gives an idea of the kind of repertoire that's there. It's a piece by Zoltan Kodály called Donkey. And I suppose where we are slightly at an advantage with this is that tune is a song that the children will have sung at kindergarten, so they all know the song. But the rhythms are quite complex. There's this lovely pattern here in this third violin part here, which is a nice repeated pattern. They always introduce elements in this one. While it's pizzicato, they use this syncopated rhythm and things like that that goes through this one, and it's a really lovely piece for full pizzicato orchestra for people that are looking for that. I have no problem, like I say, at the end, if people want some of this stuff, I'll share it, and then you can decide if you like the material, and you could go and look at some other books. I think is the easiest thing. I do steal then, because the kids have gotten a lot better. This came from the last course that you had down in Waterford, which I stole. This is what Star Wars looks like in colours, and edited and things like that. And I've done countless other things for the children along the same way. We've got sort of, if anybody wants them, like I say, they're more than welcome. This is Vivaldi's Four Seasons, which I did a couple of weeks back, and the children, that's the first movement done, where all of the thematic material is dealt with and some bit simplified in parts and things like that, but the entire movement is there in a way that it's not quite so edited as in some other parts. So in terms of what we do, in relation to this, because we have a slightly different philosophy than around when we actually do bring ensembles together, orchestras, and that I'm not remotely interested in teaching children how to play the notes at a rehearsal. I think one of the biggest problems that we have encountered with certainly with the children we have is that if they come to rehearsal and you're learning the music, which is the way I was brought up, and I hated it, going to rehearsals and learning the music at the rehearsals meant that you were very often sitting there waiting for somebody else to learn notes next to you, and you're bored. So we have a strict policy that you have to learn all of the music before you're allowed to come to a rehearsal. So the orchestra that we now have, which is still just upper strings really, is based on the idea that everybody learns and shapes and prepares their parts, and then they come together to learn how to be an ensemble. So that's the point at which we actually practice all of the things that you guys have been talking about, and all of the activities and games that we play and everything else are all around bringing a particular piece of music that they're already familiar and comfortable with together. And so the rehearsals are really, really high intensity things that they just love, because they come out of it having, in some cases, done an entire piece in a single session. Not to full performance, but it's almost there every single time. And so that's and that's sort of a general overview of how we tend to view this sort of thing, because, as I say, we incorporate a lot of the ensemble work into classes and into lessons as it is. So those were the things. In terms of repertoire, there was a few things that people didn't mention. I'm sure you already know them, but I just thought I'd
I'm so sorry, because we didn't work out an etiquette for how I was going to mind your time. If you could send the repertoire as links, and that we will publish them in the final and share them that way. Would that be okay with you?
We can. There's only two. Just quickly.
I want to stay on time.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna.
And
we've got one German and one Northern Irish person.
Yeah. What I'm going to do is I'll type them into the chat there as
that's brilliant.
Hugh,
that's fantastic. Thank you so much.
Thank you, and I'm glad you mentioned those pieces and those books. I've worked with them as well. It's I've taken some of them because they really give a different aspect again that you can't really find somewhere else. So do have a look in that, and do have a look at Hugh's arrangements of them. Thanks very much. Now I leave over to Portugal, I believe, the Berliner in Portugal. Dara, this is your 10 minutes starting.
Great. I probably will take shorter than that, which is, yeah, probably the only person that will stick to that. I'm going to talk about double bass. As everybody knows, there's not so much existing material for double bass in chamber music, which has always been something that has puzzled me. You would think that double bass should be part of the string quartet, string quartet following a similar tradition, or seems like the consort tradition of the 1600s and 1700s, being a full family. You would expect it to be violin, viola, cello, bass. But when you examine the development of the double bass, or the development of the instrument itself, it becomes apparent why it doesn't exist within the string quartet. I've got some slideshows, but more just kind of points to keep me on track. I will share it with you, of course. So I'm going to give a little bit of history about the instrument itself. Not so much, and then I'm going to give some advice on how to score for it in an amateur context, because obviously it's very different from a professional context. So double bass instruments date back at least as far as 1493. Mentioned in a letter from an Italian musician called Prospero, and he talked about viols as big as himself. The viol is the first place that we discovered or we find double bass instruments. These would have had gut strings, gut frets, and yeah, we had 6 strings, the same as any other viol instrument. They didn't die out at the end of the Baroque period, probably because of their range, and they were brought into the orchestra as supportive instruments to double the voice, the cello voice, hence the name double bass. There were over 200 different models of double bass. This would have been different amount of strings and different tunings of strings. Some of them would have been fretted as well, and other models were not fretted. One of the most notable models is the Viennese bass that was used in Austria and Germany throughout the 1700s. From the years 1765 1775, there's nearly 30 double bass concertos written. Now, I know that's a very small number in comparison to any other instrument, but 30 double bass concertos is quite a lot for us. And there would be composers such as Van Hal, Zimmermann, Haydn. Unfortunately, that one's lost, of course. Franz Hofmeister, Johann Sergi, and Tutor. In the 1800s, we have the birth of the standard tuning that we have now, with the double bass tuned in fourths, which is one of its primary differences from the rest of the violin family. And that was largely brought about by a very influential bass player called Domenico Dragonetti. Since then, we've had 200 years of development, and the instrument is played in many different genres now, in many different ways. Now, when we're writing for double bass, when we're writing for any instrument, we need to take the reality of the sound into context. So if you were to employ a professional player, the dynamic range of the instrument that you have is much greater than if you have an amateur player or a child. When we write for double bass for a child, we really only have 1 or 2 volumes. We kind of just have piano and forte. Playing quietly on the instrument is really difficult. Playing loud on the instrument is really hard. It's much harder. So that must be taken into account when you're thinking of melody writing, or if you're thinking of building dynamics. You can kind of only really build dynamics using the range of the instrument. So any of you that compose will know that if you separate lines, as in have one line that's very high and one line that's very low, it sounds much more dramatic and sounds louder than if you have them close voiced. I'm going to stop sharing this, and I have prepared some Sibelius thingies that you can see. So over here, these are the scales that are playable in 1 position on double bass. This is first position or half position, which is particularly interesting if you are scoring for a child. B flat major, I would say. Now, there's actually, I think the double bass is overrepresented in this group. I think B flat major for me is actually the easiest scale on double bass. You can play it in half position. It's the bottom one here, and the only open string that you can't use is the E. C major requires 2 position shifts to play the top octave. If you look at it on the top one here, you have it from the bottom E up to the 7th note of the scale, and to get the actually, I'm going to redo this because I'm not showing my sound. You're not going to be able to hear that, and I want you to be able to hear things later. To get the top C, you need to position shift, which actually makes C major harder to play than G major. So yeah, it makes this harder to play than this. D major exists if you play from A to A, so it exists in the Mixolydian mode. Now, playing repeated notes obviously is harder on a double bass because the strings are thick, so they take a little bit longer to speak. So if we have repeated, sorry, the reason I'm doing this actually is that because there's not very much material within the double bass repertoire within chamber music, often we find ourselves in a position that we have to score for a double bass if we have a student that's there. So we have to write things, we want to write them quickly and effectively. Yeah, so this is a way of getting around quick notes. It's very obvious that if you have a semiquaver passage, you fill it in with quavers. So it means you get this, and it doesn't affect the overall energy of the piece. You can apply the same technique to scalic passages that the double bass plays every second note. And again, it doesn't really affect the overall energy of the piece. Don't judge me on my compositional skills within this piece. I put these together very quickly. Double bass, when you play an open string on a double bass, it contains a lot of harmonics. It's an exceptionally rich sound. So using it in as pedal notes is boring but exceptionally effective. That same pedal note can be taken and you can decorate it. A pedal note doesn't have to be just one note. You can also use it rhythmically. Which becomes this. It's a relatively simple way of decorating or making one easy line much nicer. There's one thing that's famous within double bass. Over the next section, I've just prepared there's two points to this. One is to illustrate the difference between pizzicato in terms of supporting texture and arco, and the other one's to show you a particular difficulty with the technique of double bass. Based on the fact that the strings are so big, it takes a lot more strength to press down the string. Therefore, pressing down a string and letting go of that string are two different movements and two different things that we have to do that are much more noticeable on the double bass than on another string instrument. If you notice in this bar, you have an S sharp and an A. Those are both first finger notes in the same position across two strings. One's on the E string first position and the other one's on the G string. That's actually quite a difficult thing to play because of the movement. So I'm not describing it very well, but letting go of the position in your left hand and then pressing it on the G string actually takes quite a lot of time, and this bar would be in danger of being quite messy with the young player. Pizzicato is a much louder, much more sonorous, and much more penetrative sound on the double bass than its arco sound. This passage, for instance, wouldn't work if the double bass was in arco, and I would suggest if you do want it to be arco, that you support it with the cello. Thankfully, the MIDI in this is actually good enough to illustrate this. Yeah, so this is what this would sound like. Okay, I've rewritten this bar, so you'd rewrite it to that to make it easier. So that's now an open string and fourth finger on the D string. This particular passage here, which is the exact same passage with arco, you'll find that the bass will disappear because it does the start of the note when it's pitched, it's much louder at the start, but when you I'm trying to imitate a sound wave. If you were to see the sound wave recorded, if you pitch, it's much louder at the start, then it gets quieter. But if you bow, it's much quieter at the start, then it gets louder. So it loses its penetrative quality and disappears based on the fact that it's such a low register. that doesn't illustrate the point so much. But this is what I would rescore this as. Support it with the cello. Okay. That brings me to the end of my segment.
Your timing is exquisite. Good job. That was excellent, Dara. Thank you. Orchestration presentation next time, Bertie, please.
Yeah, no, that's always you know, we right now have two beautiful double basses and always trying to integrate them as good as possible. So that can be a segment all by itself in another one. Niamh,
I'm here. 3 minutes.
So sorry to leave you to last, but you know you always want the best at the end. And Niamh, this is your time.
Oh gosh, no pressure. Well, I suppose, look, I will just be, I suppose, try and put the points that I have across nice and quickly. A lot of things have been said already, and I know lots of you, so apologies if I repeat anything. But I suppose the real thing I find with chamber music is just how fantastic it is, you know, to develop their listening. But I also use it very much for trying to develop their sight reading, because I do think that sight reading is something that, you know, can be kind of left, you know, the kids don't tend to practice it themselves or whatever, you know. So I do obviously try and leave lesson time, but I just find the chamber music time can be actually very useful to do some of that. You know, because I suppose one of the things for me is that, you know, with sight reading is that so many kids think sight reading is just about reading the notes, and they don't actually, you know, think that it's about the pulse and the rhythm and the dynamics and everything else that is so important. You know, and I just find it so important and beneficial in their solo performances. As an accompanist, I know I can tell immediately kids who actually do chamber music and kids who don't, because, you know, I always say to them, look, my job here is to follow you. But at the end of the day, intuitively, as soon as they have been playing chamber music, when it comes to their own solo pieces and everything, they see it more as a partnership and more as a duet with their accompanist instead of actually, you know, just their own solo performance. So the way we actually run our chamber music program here in the school in Sligo is we tend to meet once a month, obviously not at the moment, but in previous times we would have met about once a month. We do a 2-hour session. And we would give the kids 2 kind of sets of pieces. We give them an easier piece and, you know, something a bit more challenging that they'll really have to work on and take home and practice and everything. And we use the easier pieces, and we actually meet together after an hour and a half and just have a little informal playthrough every time for the kids. So they're doing a performance every time, but it's an informal performance, you know, to make it not so scary or anything like that. But they perform something that they literally just got, you know, an hour and a half earlier. And I've just found that really, really useful, just in helping them. It's something that we as musicians, I suppose, have to do all the time, and it's not something that you know, if you go in to play in an orchestra, you walk in there and there's music put in your stand and you're expected to play it, you know, after a few hours of rehearsal. You're expected to do it for a concert. So it's not always the case where you're going to have it at home for, you know, a long time to work. So we try to give the kids a balance of the two things, just to work that way. So just quickly, I suppose what I was looking at was just the very starting, the repertoire that I would use for the really, really beginner ensembles. You know, I would often start either 2 ways. One, which would be to use, you know, kind of a couple of kids on each part, as we spoke about earlier, you know, giving them more confidence when they're playing with somebody else. And there's lots of really nice music for that, and lots of groups things written obviously by Sheila Nelson. I'll just show you a few things here. Sorry, if we go, hopefully I can get on, if you can see that. So obviously that's from the tunes, you know, the Sheila Nelson. Now that's written for 2 violins, but it's also written for cellos as well. You know, you have things like Lollipop Man, again, written for violins, violas and cellos, but you can use any combination of the 2. And it's just, I find it really helpful in certainly at the very beginning, that they can actually see the other part and have that visual aid. I think Gary had mentioned that earlier, to have that visual aid of where their part actually fits in, as well as the oral awareness. So as I said, I would start with Sheila has just loads of lovely little tunes in that, you know, some a little bit more intricate than others, and I think that's Katharina's French folk tune that we were talking about yesterday, that's done there nicely in 2 parts. Then I tend to graduate on to try to get to pieces that are really written in block harmony. And there's one lady in particular who I'm not sure I've heard mentioned yet, but I just absolutely love her stuff, and that's Mary Cohen. And Mary Cohen, to me, I just think she has done so much, like the amount of music she has there for solo string playing, but also for all the chamber music is just fabulous. All that super series that she does. I know one of the difficulties, you're talking about the difficulties with scales, one of the difficulties I have with my students is actually studies, and they get to study that 3rd piece for the exam, and here's, oh, the groan when the study comes out, you know. And just all her studies, all that technique takes off, super studies. They're just so well written and really, really good for all the different levels of string playing. So this is just one book. It was actually when I went to start with orchestra for the very first time in the school back in about 2002, and it was Vanessa Sweeney recommended this book to me, and she said, you know, because we just had strings, they had literally only been learning for about 18 months, up to 2 years, and this was our first thing. So this is a very special place to me. It's the very first piece our orchestra ever played, which is called Rondosaurus. So basically, as you can see, everything, all the parts are in. You have your violin 3, obviously doubling viola, but all the parts rhythmically the whole way through are in the block harmony and block rhythms. Then just, I also like the way in the book she's actually written in the count for them, so you can actually see there she's literally counted, like, you know, what they should be counting in their bars rest. Again, you get the ideas here where she does give a break for everybody, and you want to have, you know, starting again, say at letter B, it gives you lots of time to help the kids to actually get used to giving the motion and the movement of leading into the next section. So there's a few other pieces. Sorry, I'm going quickly through this. Other pieces through this, you can see at the beginning here of each piece, she has a rehearsal tip of how she thinks would work really well. So, you know, working the different sections there, you know, like she's saying, work B to E and G to I, and then add the sections to build up bars. So just lots of really good tips on helping the work through the pieces. Also, the other thing I like is that she uses just some interesting techniques for the kids, which I think they always really enjoy, you know, all those kind of left-hand pizzicatos and tremolos and harmonics and tapping on the violin and all that kind of thing. The kids really enjoy just the more unusual techniques. But she also uses rhythmic patterns, like Katharina was saying, where you have the rhythmic patterns with the words on them. So here she has you know, trying to get them, obviously she has her words of elephant, alligator, hippopotamus for the different rhythms, and, you know, trying to make it 3/8, 4/8, 5/8. You know, it's just make it easy for them with counting. So obviously she suggests saying the words and saying the rhythm first and going through. But I absolutely love this book. I would find I use it all the time with my very, very beginner baby quartets, because I think the pieces are really well written. They work very well, you know, under the fingers. They're all written in the D major position in first position, you know, but there's, I said, the rhythms and things like that, and the melodies are actually very interesting. So that's that one. Another set that I would use quite a bit is, actually, before I left that, I should have said she actually has a lot. She has Quartet Start 2, but she also has the Christmas Quartet Start. She has lots and lots of different books there of quartet things, which are very useful for the beginners. All of her stuff is actually on Faber Music. Now, those books, you have to purchase the actual book, but she does have a lot of individual pieces, and they're there in different instrumental duets. This is all on fabermusic.com. So you can see she sings for, you know, violin, viola, cello, for 3 violins, for violin duet, flute and harp, lots of different things you can download, and you can actually listen to the music before you download it, which is nice. Although it is only a kind of Sibelius sound, which isn't always the most pleasing to listen to. She also has on the Faber site, she has there's a bit of tips and tricks and games that she does for you know, young string kids, and posters and things like that. So there's just lots of good things from Mary Cohen on Faber Music, and all of those PDFs that she has of the games and word searches and all kinds of things are all free to download. Then just moving on, another thing that I would tend to do with some of the beginner ensembles is I like these ones. I think maybe Tom had mentioned them, or Gary earlier, just the Katharine and Hugh Coolidge. These kind of things I would use for our small ensembles, because they have parts already written for like a second viola part and a second cello part, just an easier part for the strings. They also have a piano accompaniment. They come with the CD. So you can have quite an intricate piano accompaniment, quite simple stuff for the strings, but it'll work in any combination, really, you know, once you have the melody line going. So you can work with any ensemble. And she has all kinds of a Caribbean suite, Celtic suite, a French suite, and lots of folk tunes from around the world, which I think the kids really enjoy, the different styles of music, you know. Then there's another set that I would use, and this is, I suppose, when they get that little bit more advanced. But what I would find, we don't always have the usual setup of 2 violins, viola and cello, or even 3 violins and cello. We have kids all the time coming to us who play clarinets and oboes and flutes and saxophones, who would all like to be part of the chamber music as well. So I found all of this series really, really useful. We use it in the orchestra as well. It's the Phoenix music. So basically they do these flexible ensembles, mostly popular music. So this is, say, Goldfinger, but they have just loads and loads of popular songs that the kids would actually know, but they're written basically just in 4 parts. So you have a 4-part, but it's written in every key for, you know, E-flat saxophones and for B-flat clarinets and you know, any. And so you can actually, it's very, very flexible, and they have optional piano and optional percussion if you want to add it in as well. They also have their easy violin or easy string parts here, and then I said that they have all the different parts, 1, 2, 3 and 4. So I just find all of that Phoenix music, there's just loads and loads of different titles, loads of popular things, because as Christy was saying, I think once the kids, often if you get them that they know the music that they're dealing with in advance, it can really help them, do you know what I mean, and they can really enjoy that. So yeah, I suppose that's just the main thing that we try and do here is just to get that balance between the sight reading of a piece of music and actually really working and preparing a piece of music, and just getting them performing as much as we can, so that they can develop their playing. There, I can't speak any quicker. That's all I can say. So that's, but you look at, I'll send on those lists of different pieces and things that we use onto Bertie, and hopefully some of you will get some good pieces from that.
Well done, Niamh. I've just compiled the chat into a list of websites rather than any of the private stuff that we were saying to each other. So I'll send that out as a Word document that just has hyperlinks in it, so that it'll be there, because I can never find the chat after the recording. Okay.
Excellent. Well, I'm so glad that you mentioned those other composers that are so important within chamber music, like Mary Cohen. So I'm really, really glad that you took her up. I was wondering if anybody would. I've worked with her loads in the past, and I've forgotten about her a little bit the past little while, and I guess it's because she doesn't have much online. So when you quickly need something or whatever, you know, whatever you have in the computer is easier there. But it's really important to just go back to those people also who have established all of this, you know, and like Sheila as well. I was talking to Katharine before, you know, who has worked with Sheila Nelson quite a bit in the beginning, and then went to other things. this repertoire. I'm hugely inspired now to start working with all these string quartets, and I kind of have forgotten about this bloody virus in the meantime. Thought, yes, next week I'm gonna get them all together, but soon enough, we'll do all of that. So I encourage everybody to really, you know, take advantage now of all the names and all the little things that you've heard. And you know, I know lots of people have taken notes, and we will email things out, but it's so easy to forget them in an hour or 2 or 3, and by tomorrow it's like, what? Oh yeah, we had this webinar. So just take the chance now and really follow that up. Now we will see you all very soon again. I just gonna tell you what's gonna happen. Oh, Katharine, yes?
I was going to say it too. I'm all excited.
Well, it's so in our wrap-up session, which is really a wrap-up session where, you know, where we will have the time as well to really discuss a little bit, present my own way of doing rhythms very, very practically with my kids and with the quartets and orchestras and whatever, and just yeah, the system that I'm working with, which it's not perfect in any way, but it has helped a lot. And I would love to then get, you know, input of how other people solve this, so to maybe develop something that works even better. And I was just wondering, are any of you using the Violin Circus cards by what's her name, Kundra? Christy is, yes.
I have them, but I actually haven't used them with my pupils because they're only in English and German.
Oh, right.
And well, I have 4 English-speaking pupils.
Well, I can, if the majority of you don't know them, I would like to just do that. Yeah. So that's my thing. Rhythm and very practical rhythm training within this, and for the sight reading, and then introducing those cards. And then Katharine, I leave over to you.
I am going to look at a couple of exercises that I do for basic tuning, coming from a Suzuki background and ringing tones. A wee story about localized keys and leading notes, to get what Hugh was talking about B is different in D major than it is in B major, or whatever it is. And I also want you to bring your instruments. So can I ask, do I need to present a transposing part for anybody, or am I all right with a treble and a bass clef? They're very unenthusiastically going, oh God. Okay. Bring an instrument. What I'm interested in, will you all put your speakers on for 1 second? Okay, because all right. And Bertie and I have done this before. I think that feels different. I know that it's dependent on having quiet households, and you saw me put my screen off a couple of times. I got teenagers. Mom, oh jeez. Turn it off. But I can hear your breath in, Gary, so I can hear the appreciation. I think within a controlled setting, it feels entirely different. And I would like to see, because we all giggle through presentations, but we do feel, as Tom said, bouncing a ball off a dead wall a wee bit. I think that feels different, and it's how I start all my rehearsals with my orchestras. I think I'm going to experiment with you guys as guinea pigs and see whether we can do quartets through Zoom.